Well, I guess I have to pack my bags. See ya. Thanks for joining me for another Metal Pulpit. Now, what I was talking about there is something that I almost feel like I've missed the memo on within the organization that I have my credential through. It just seems like there are so many people, pastors and a couple of youth pastors resigning and moving to a new area, not leaving ministry, just going to another area. And I'm sitting here like, wow. You know, that reminds me of each year we have a big business meeting within the denomination that I have my credential through, and inevitably there is always a few people where they get the 50+ year award, or as an ordained minister of God. Things get more spiritual when you say GAWD, God. We say God, but if you go on and get spiritual, then you say God. But what's interesting is these people, they're they're in their 60s, a few in their 70s, and they start getting recognized. And the pastor that's doing this is reading this list, and it's just a barrage of places that they've been. And I'm looking at it like, so if this serves me right, my math serves me right, this person's been switching every 4 or 5 years. And we go down the list of places they've served and everything. And I don't know if I should applaud or cry at that point. You see, the Barna report, George Barna report, last that I read was the average stay of a senior pastor, lead pastor. If you're really trendy, it'd be executive pastor, is 3.6 years. The average stay of a youth pastor is 18 to 24 months. Now, this is up from what it was in the 90s. I mean, we were changing pastors like my kid changes his diaper. It was just all the time. And I look back at that, and it makes me think of a few things. Number one, there are legitimate reasons for a pastor to leave their church. Okay, I'll leave it at that. There are legitimate reasons for a staff pastor to leave their church. Staff pastor meaning youth pastor, children's pastor, worship pastor, all of these things. As a youth pastor, a former youth pastor that was jerked around a lot in my 8-9 years of doing it, it is difficult to be on staff at a church and expect your fate to fall on that pastor, because if that pastor ends up leaving or going somewhere else, it's probably time for that staff pastor to start packing their bags as well. The church could love them to death. The church I was at in Milwaukee, they loved me. But the board didn't, and the powers that be that came down to the business meeting, they didn't either. And so I ended up having to leave after being there for 8 years. And it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. In my case, the pastor that I was serving under had an affair. I know we say moral failing, but I'm sick of saying that. He had an affair. And me, I'm just sitting there loving my wife, loving my ministry, and I'm the one that had to go as well. And I learned during those times that when a church is going through a transition, they sometimes will turn to the staff pastor and say, we need some interim pastor, would you be willing to speak? Keep in mind, what they're really asking is, we need an interim speaker, not an interim pastor, because a pastor does all the behind the scenes stuff, and they really don't want that. So I look at that and I say, where's the longevity in ministry? Because there are legitimate reasons for leaving, as I mentioned, but then there are those who say, God has called me to a new church, wherever that may be, when in fact, and I've been around for 20 years, when in fact, what they're saying is, I have more freedom and get more pay at the church I'm going to now, so I am leaving. And we flag that as God calling us somewhere else. Here's the deal. My friend, my youth pastor, mentor, she's in her 60s, maybe 70s now. Her name's Jeannie Mayo. She said, here's the deal. If you're one of those youth pastors, if you're one of those senior pastors that start and stop every 1 to 2 years and move on somewhere else, do us all a favor and quit the ministry, because we're the ones that have to clean up after you. You see, longevity in ministry is something to be celebrated. I understand fully why sometimes that can't be the case, because some churches just don't treat their pastors and staff right. I get it. But for those of you that are hopping, hoping to climb the ladder in your denomination or get to the next biggest church, knock it off. Plain and simple, knock it off. Because you start skewing things, and then as pastors that come in that have longevity, well, quite honestly, we're the ones that have to deal with all of this. I think the key to church growth, by the way, is longevity in ministry. Staying at one place, going at it for a long time. There's a church up here about 2 hours north of us, a little town, but a huge church. And it wasn't always like that, but the pastor's been there 30 years. And boy, they just do phenomenal. My church that I grew up in Milwaukee, the pastor just celebrated 30 years at that church. And I can say when I was a teenager, he was there. And just a phenomenal guy. The church is booming, it's doing well. But 30 years, those are the people that earn my respect, are the ones that stay under that umbrella of that name of that ministry or in that church for a long time. Because longevity in ministry, it's an important thing. It is not easy, but it is a very important thing. Thanks for watching. Bye.